Those Days with the Monsters, Part 36. It had been 3 days since Kirrel first made acquaintance with the creature called a cat. She seemed to be following him around now. Once he had woken with something heavy on his head. He'd been afraid to look, his muddled mind assuming it was another nasty joke from his clutch. When he looked, he almost wished it had been. The cat's dilated eyes reflected the light horribly. He could easily believe she had meant to eat him, if his frills flaring hadn't scared her off.
"Alex,"
he said, taking a drink of the stuff Doc had made for him. It didn't have a very pleasant taste, but it seemed to do the job. Alex was drinking her blue stuff as well, and yet she still managed to respond in a way that made sense. Kirrel's translator had no idea what it meant, but to Kirrel the meaning was clear. She was asking what he wanted. How in all the galaxies had he figured that one out? There was no expression and no real words, just a rising tone. Kirrel felt briefly proud of himself, until he realised that Alex was looking at him, waiting for a reply. He wasn't sure how long he'd been thinking, but it was long enough for her to notice.
Right. Does Captain Amelia always follow people around?"
I think it depends on the person. Why? Is she following you?
"I don't know. Maybe."
Kirrel glanced over to where Captain Amelia lay on a mat. She looked back at him evenly, the tip of her tail twitching slightly. He didn't know exactly what that meant, but he was sure it wasn't good.
"She's been here the last few days, right?"
Alex wiped her mouth and put down the bottle of blue stuff. "Has she? I didn't realise she liked you so much."
Is that what it is?"
Kirrel asked faintly, feeling the cat's unnerving stare on his back. "It's either that or she doesn't know what to make of you. Could be either one." Alex glanced across to the mat where Captain Amelia lounged, and her teeth bared themselves. "I think she likes to follow people who are stressed. Not sure why." Kirrel wasn't sure which was more concerning, how Captain Amelia could tell he was stressed, or how Alex could tell he was stressed. He thought he'd done a pretty good job of hiding it.
"Does she follow everyone who's stressed?"
No, not all the time. She's pretty selective. I remember she would follow Sleepy around a lot when she came on board first. Maybe it's because he was upset." Kirrel, slightly dazed, tried to imagine what that would look like. Sleepy being upset was not something he could picture easily. Sleepy always had his eyes half closed, a lazy voice, and unhurried movements. Well, maybe he hadn't moved slowly when the Tizzicks boarded the ship, but Kirrel had had his inner eyelids closed, so he didn't know what that might look like.
"Sleepy was upset?"
He found himself asking weakly, both trying to understand and trying not to. "Still is, from what I understand." Alex paused for a minute, then raised her shoulders in a careless shrug. "I don't think it's an angry kind of upset. More like a long, sad kind of upset. A long, slow sadness. Was it the kind that crept into your bones?" Kirrel wondered. Was it perhaps like
"Blue edges"?
Kirrel didn't realise he'd said it aloud until Alex sighed and looked away. His heart sank. He knew he still had the Rollaway's blue tinge. He hadn't meant to reveal that. Alex might be sad. "I don't know exactly what that means, but it might be the same thing. Anyway, Captain Amelia seems to like to follow people like that. Or maybe you're just a different species and she's curious. Could be either one, really." Kirrel glanced at the cat nervously.
"I see."
She was busy cleaning one paw. Not an extremely threatening activity exactly, but he still remembered those sharp white teeth sinking into Alex's hand. The fact that the hand was metal didn't really change his opinion on the bite. "Okay, break's over." Alex's brisk voice cut through Kirrel's thoughts, and he returned to the mat, once again trying for the kick she wanted him to learn, and again he found himself tipping over, about to land on the mat. Things seemed to slow down again. He didn't want to fall again, He was too close to Captain Amelia. What if she bit him while he was on the mat? What if he got infected with something? The last time Doc had said it was a miracle he'd pulled through. What if this time he didn't? He didn't want to fall now. In this moment of strange, slow time, Kirrel found himself looking at Alex. She seemed to be baring her teeth slightly at him. He still couldn't land a hit on her, but she didn't seem angry. But she told him to hit her. Wasn't he failing? Kirrel felt the foot that he tried to use to kick bump into Alex's arm, and time seemed to muddle, both slow and fast at the same time. When things settled down, he was on the mat again, and Alex was crouched over him, her eyes wide in an expression he'd never seen before. Surprise. Had Kirrel ever surprised Alex before? He couldn't remember doing so. Wow, that was slick. Alex began to make the cumin amusement noise, looking at her arm. Kirrel glanced at it as well, and discovered that his claws had hooked around it. His back hurt more than normal. What had just happened? Almost had me.
Almost? What? What just happened?
Kirrel felt rather dazed. A few long hairs appeared from above his head, with a sniffing sound and a tiny tickle at the top of his skull. Was that Captain Amelia? What do you mean what just happened? You just pulled off one of the slickest tricks I've seen a trainee do. Alex unhooked her arm and looked at it. A series of red marks showed where Kirrel's claws had made impact. Those will bruise up later, I think. Kirrel shook his head and heard a light tap 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 as he did so. The sniffing sound disappearing. Had he scared the cat off?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Shut up, kid. Alex's teeth were bared, her eyes bright. Look how many times I've given you bruises. It's only fair you get to give me a couple too. Looks like it was instinctive. I definitely didn't teach you grapples yet. That's good news. Alex seemed satisfied somehow. You made a hook as you went over and grabbed onto my arm. If I hadn't kept going with it, I would have been the one on the mat.
I almost knocked you over.
Kirrel sat up.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be. That's why you're here. But sadly for you, I went with the bull and turned it back into flipping you. Kirrel's frills flared at the statement. She could do that? But anyway, something tells me we might want to do some extra work later. Well, that was ominous. Kirrel was about to speak when the door opened, and Smee looked in, panting as if he'd been running. Hey sis, Cap says the trap went off. We're going in. Alex nodded and pointed to a wall seat. Strap in, kid. We're going for a ride. Even more ominous. Read by me, a good bean.